From hints at the release window to discussing the personal effects of the game development process and a whole bunch of in-game mechanics and cards, we got to dive in behind the scenes in Reynad's recent stream. But don't worry, you don't have to watch the VOD for hours on end. I've done that for you. And we've summarised it here in this short little video, so stay tuned. This is actually part 2 of our cover of the stream that Reynad did at the weekend. For the slightly more juicier bits, including the leaks of his Trello board and a look behind the scenes at the new production build, make sure to check out our previous video. Links below. Now, on to the major topic which he discussed quite considerably during his stream. And this wasn't because he wanted to, but because it's basically the only thing that chat were capable of asking. When is the game coming out? The most typical answer was that release would be this year. Later on this year. Release coming in 2021. You get the picture. Basically, we'll get it before the year's out. Now, we've heard this before. We did a look back at the very first Q&A, if you want to check that out on the channel, where they actually said that they would be releasing in 2019 back then. But obviously, a lot has changed. Since then, the entire game has basically been reworked. But at least even in the last few months, obviously we heard things like Q2 and Q3 of 2021 being thrown around. But even in the last few months, we've had entire new systems be developed for the game. Only now are we starting to hear from Reynad, even during this stream, that things are starting to be out of scope that he would like to do. And they're being pushed into more post-launch things. Nothing important, don't worry, that we're going to get a fully polished, fully functional game. They're just having to start to say no to certain things they'd like to do. Now, the reason why I don't think this is going to be released in Q3 and why I think we might be getting it in Q4 instead, my personal prediction, late November, early December, bite me, that's what I'm saying for now. However, the reason why I'm saying this is because at one point, Reynad kind of got called out by someone saying, "You keep saying this year, not Q3." To which our lovely Noodle said, "Sure do." That's it. Just agreeing. Yes, I keep saying this year instead of Q3. This could of course mean that Reynad wants to keep things very open. He doesn't want to commit to Q3. Maybe they're aiming for Q3, but he thinks they might miss it, or there's a chance they'll miss it, so he doesn't want to commit to it. But they'd already kind of committed to it. Not really committed, but Q2 and now Q3 was listed on the Republic page. But now he's very specifically saying this year and not Q3, even when you're being called out by it. So that's why I think my sort of Q4 prediction could be correct. He did also allude to the beta that would also be this year. He just, based off the way he was saying this, made me think that it was, again, going to be a short beta leading up to the release, rather than a much lengthier one, which is actually a good thing, and that's coming from someone who should have beta access. One thing I would also like to point out here, in the sort of the release of the Bazaar section, is that he said that they are unlikely to pay streamers. This is just a startup company, effectively, or a startup game anyway. He would like them to be playing the Bazaar because they want to play. That'll also help increase the sort of general feel around the Bazaar. There won't be anyone playing it that doesn't necessarily want to play it. That being said, he will incentivize them, perhaps with streamer codes or early access, or beta key drops in their channel. He isn't quite sure how he wants to do it, but he does want to incentivize streaming the game in general, but he doesn't necessarily want to just pay off super popular streamers. If you see your favourite streamer playing the Bazaar, it's because they want to. This stream, while we did learn a lot about the Bazaar, the majority of what we learned was covered in the previous video. We saw a lot of new card stuff, and I'll get into some more of that later. But the one thing that we saw come up a lot was Reynad talking and discussing the general process, and how the process has affected him as a game designer, game developer, streamer, and just general person. He's had to overcome a lot of challenges. The biggest of which, he said, have been internal within himself. He had to rebuild his way of thinking to overcome a number of obstacles. He does tend to bully himself into making things happen, and all in all, I don't know how good of a process this has been for him. I mean, he's definitely come out the other end as a more well-rounded individual, I would say, but it certainly hasn't been easy. If he were to do it all again, he did say that he would not make the process transparent. There have been pros, but there have also been cons. He thought he could explain things based on actual evidence, but in practice, even though most do listen to that, there are very few loud, very loud people that don't listen to that at all, and just repeat the same things over and over. He did go into the essay stuff a little bit. I'm not going to jump on that train, just my word to you out there, if you have concerns about the Bazaar and wish to raise them, please do so in a constructive and concise way. If you keep throwing giant essays at Reynad, chances are he's already seen everything you're going to write, because there have been a lot of these essays before, and they're just going to piss him off. Even if you make a good, reasonable point, they're just going to piss him off. Make it concise, get your point done, and he might actually respond. Now, let's talk a little bit about the actual game design and development. With the move to the new matchmaking systems and the lack of having turn timers and stuff, they don't actually need to send any real-time data in fights. It's all auto-battled straight away. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This doesn't mean, oh, it's removing complexity and we're gaining nothing. They actually have a lot of really cool and interesting ideas to make our builds look incredible that you wouldn't be able to do if you were trying to build a busy network and trying to allow for player manipulation. They can actually sort of build a story or tell a story through these fights based on the cards that appear. Spectating is one of these features that may become a post-launch thing. We already have the replay functionality, so you can watch back your own thing and you can share it with people, you can stream the game, but specifically spectating might not come at the launch of the game, which could prove to be a little bit of a problem for esports and the like, but it's something I'm sure they'll focus on. Speaking of making battles more viewer-friendly, and to be perfectly honest, player-friendly too, we're viewers, right? They're looking for the highest non-deterministic fight time, which he repeated at length and described at length. It basically boils down to the fights having the largest period of time before you realise who's going to win. That period of not knowing which way the battle is going to go is the most fun part. You're on the edge of your chair. Will I win? Will I lose? What's going to happen? If that's over in a second, or if the fight itself is over in a second, that's bad. But even if that non-deterministic bit is over in a second, and you're like, oh, okay, this person's just got 1,000,000 health, I'm not going to kill them, the sandstorm's going to eventually kill me, you're sat there for like 30 seconds waiting to die. Realistically, the team want to aim for sort of 10 to 15 second fights, where the majority of that time is non-deterministic. You have no idea who is going to win, and therefore, you have the most fun. And in a non-deterministic world like that, if you can correctly predict who's going to win early on, if you can make it deterministic, then you're going to feel pretty big brain, right? Now let's move on to the more deck building and board state of affairs of the game. There are a couple things that Reynad raised here. The first one is just complete conjecture. Maybe this happens, maybe it doesn't. But at the moment, we start with 10 board spaces. Reynad absolutely in passing mentioned that it might be interesting, and they're tempted to perhaps change it so that you unlock some of these spaces as you go through encounters. So day 1, let's say maybe you have 5 spaces. Day 2, you'd have 6. Day 3, you'd have 7. Maybe a merchant comes on, you can buy an extra space early. Something like that. Just add a little bit of extra sort of growth to the game. Because at the very beginning, at the moment, you tend to start with a medium item, sometimes a small item, on a giant board of empty space. So, maybe this makes it feel like the game's paced a bit more better. Next up, at the moment, they are concerned that it's a little bit too easy to force a build. Now, they only have 70% of the class cards in, so Vanessa has 100 cards. There are only 70 cards of hers in the game as far as we know. They are working very hard to kill the meta across the board. Not all features that make it harder to force stuff are in yet, so it's entirely possible that for, say, the affix system that's about to come in, the main form of upgrading in the game, that should kill metas, that was not yet in this patch. So it's entirely possible that that's the key thing that's missing. But even if it isn't, just be aware they are trying to make sure that meta is murdered. The last thing Reynad wants is people being able to just go onto, I don't know, a website like Tempo Storm, maybe, and find a build and just run with that. Lastly, on game design and development, they are talking about progression systems a lot. They have been for years now. You don't currently level up a hero or anything like that. He didn't want to say what they're going to go for, but there's definitely going to be progression of some kind. Progression for me is a huge important factor. I definitely do get foiled by the sort of addictive progression system that are in games. And, I'm happy to play them. If I'm having fun, then I don't mind being swindled slightly. But they need to get this right. A progression system is vital to the longevity of a game, especially just at launch. So I really hope there's something to just capture us and make us want to keep progressing. Honestly, one of the key things is being able to show off your progression. Being able to boast and gloat to your friends. Look at me, I'm already a level 15 Pygmalion because I've non-stop played him. Having that, and maybe having it show when you load into a fight, maybe it shows you the rank or level of the opposing character. That doesn't necessarily show their skill, but shows their dedication. That sort of progression for me is a big win. Not just because it makes me want to play more, but I feel like it's typically the better performing progression systems. There were a few more changes to the game to come though, outside of design and development. They were talking about the animations within the battle, and the giant boulder is actually supposed to have and these were Reynad's words, big ass rolling ball. Basically the Indiana Jones giant boulder animation. There are also already board sounds as you click on the board that sort of move between your headphones dynamically. A really nice touch. I mentioned it recently in a stream, I think, that they need to have the clicky sound down, and they do have the clicky sound down. We do now know that monsters will be getting custom items. The Void Lord will have a singularity black hole item thing, so, you know, we're confirmed that at least some of these monsters will be having custom items, and we actually even saw the Void Lord's singularity black hole on the Trello board, so we know that it's quite far along in development. Speaking about events, the one event during the entire stream that absolutely struck me as incredible was the Magic Mirror Merchant. So, you see this Magic Mirror Merchant as one of a couple of merchants you could go to. If you click on it, it doesn't generate a random collection of items to sell to you. Oh no, it copies your board and then offers that as sale back to you. Now, I don't know if it would copy affixes and stuff like that, maybe that would be a bit strong, but even just copying the base items is so good. If you have a build that synergizes well with more of what you already own, this Magic Mirror Merchant can actually be an absolute godsend. But that only just barely beats out the other favourite event that I saw. And we already knew this was coming, otherwise this would hands down be my favourite, but we finally saw it in a game. You can visit other heroes as merchants in the game as it is now. We saw that Vanessa appeared in his Pygmalion run, and he was able to like grab an aquatic item and try and run a aquatic Pygmalion build. There was a little bug that meant it didn't work yet, but that's going to be a possibility in the future. That is incredible. I finally get to buy Dragon Egg as jewels and cook it. Anyway, there are a couple of other sort of miscellaneous bits that I wanted to add on here. The lore itself, Reynad spoke about at considerable length, and seeing as we just got more lore thanks to his Trello board escapades, it's a good thing that he made comments on this. He said the lore is open-ended, it's built from the sort of inside out, with plenty of space to scale up if needed, to be adding new characters, or even for things like animated shows. And while that rung a small alarm bell in my head saying basically there isn't any lore, now we've actually started to see more lore pieces. That's not the case. He just means that there aren't that many specific events. They're important events. So Jules, for example, has an event in her backstory where her father made a deal with like a devil or something, and that freed her people, but now she doesn't like the devil and blah 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 blah. There are events that happen on specific places, Dunanomia, Azaka, the Bazaar. These are named places in the lore. So there is quite a considerable amount of world building that's been done, but there's still just a lot of space. Esports has been another sort of focal point in the Bazaar Discord. If you're not already in, check the description below. You should find a link to the official Bazaar Discord. But there's been a lot of discussion there about esports of late. And Reynad sort of spiced that up a little bit by recently saying that he will not necessarily force esports, but he will 100% support it. So they are hopefully going to be giving us the tools to do so, but until he has a idea as to exactly how he wants to do this, and if there is a want and a need and desire for esports, he isn't going to force it. He's not going to make his game worse by forcing esports. He's going to release the best game he can, and if we want esports, esports will happen. Speaking of one thing that can help with things like Twitch though, there is no Twitch extension. Yet. But they are 100% working on it, so expect the Twitch extension, if not at launch, shortly after it. Now, I know that was a lot, and I tried to condense it as much as possible, but there was so much to discuss. But that's almost definitely not going to be the last Reynad stream. I hope. He did say there would be another. So, if you like these stream recaps and you want to be notified the next time one comes live, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn notifications on to be made aware of when I throw these out for you. I've been GameSlowGreg, and I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.
I'd rather be a dreamer, I'd rather be free, I'd rather be a leader, I'd rather be a queen, I'd rather be a singer in a trashy cover band. I'd rather be a closer, I'd rather be clean, I'd rather be a poser in a magazine, I'd rather be pretty much anything else than your machine.